Burkina Faso's military leader, Ibrahim Traoré, to stay in power for 5 more years. In fact, under the new agreement, Traoré will also be able to run in elections at the end of the 5-year transition period. The charter also holds the possibility of holding early polls if the security situation allows.
On a scorching afternoon in across Africa, something unusual rippled across the continent, something loud, powerful and impossible to ignore. It wasn't a routine protest or another trending hashtag. From the dusty streets of Ouagadougou to downtown Accra, Monrovia, Lagos, even as far as Paris, London and Harlem, millions of Africans stood up and raised one unified voice. We stand with Captain Ibrahim Traoré. What followed wasn't just political noise. It was a deafening declaration, a tidal wave of resistance that crossed borders and time zones. Streets filled, flags waved, songs echoed, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like the continent was not only angry, but awake. "Hands off Africa, hands off Burkina Faso," they chanted, fists raised high in defiance. This wasn't about a single country or leader anymore. It was about centuries of foreign control, silent exploitation, and broken promises. Now, people weren't just asking for change, they were demanding it. What lit the spark? 2 moments. First, a failed coup attempt in Burkina Faso aimed at removing the 37-year-old army captain turned president. Second, a stinging public comment by US General Michael Langley, who accused Traoré of using gold revenues to prop up his government while ignoring his people. To many, the timing of those events wasn't coincidence. It was a clear message from outside forces. We're watching and we don't like your independence. And Africa, in return, sent a message of its own. On April 30th, the Revolution Plaza in Ouagadougou turned into a thunderstorm of protest. Thousands of people marched through the capital, waving the red, green and yellow of Burkina Faso alongside Russian flags. But it was the banners that truly struck a chord. One showed General Langley's face with a red stamp across it. Slave Oshibian, a popular Burkinabe musician who joined the protests, summed it up in a way that left no room for misunderstanding. Colin Powell lied. Iraq was destroyed. Barack Obama lied. Gaddafi was killed. But this time, their lies won't affect us. We are against predation. We are against economic slavery. Across West Africa, in Ghana, Liberia and beyond, people poured into the streets, echoing that message. But it didn't stop there. In cities like Paris, London, New York and Toronto, the African diaspora added their voices. Online, platforms like X, formerly Twitter, lit up with one warning repeated like a mantra. Don't repeat Libya. Don't repeat Gaddafi. So what's really going on? Why is Captain Ibrahim Traoré capturing the hearts of millions across a fractured continent? Simple. He's doing what others have only talked about. Since taking power in 2022 through his second coup in under a year, Traoré has scrapped the playbook that's kept West Africa tied to France. He expelled French troops. He cancelled lopsided deals. He even ditched the CFA franc, the controversial French-controlled currency that critics call economic handcuffs. Then he went a step further. He nationalised Burkina Faso's gold industry. In 2023, the country built its first ever gold refinery. He banned exports of unprocessed gold to Europe, cutting off a lifeline that long benefited outsiders, while Burkina Faso remained poor. That wasn't just a financial shift, it was an act of economic liberation. And what did he do with that money? He poured it into education, healthcare, food security, and rebuilding war-torn communities. Despite sanctions and pressure from the international community, Traoré has made it clear the country's wealth belongs to its people, not to foreign investors or outdated colonial pacts. According to the Ministry of Education, more than 400 schools have reopened in areas once plagued by jihadist attacks. Security forces, previously under-equipped and demoralised, are regaining ground and public trust. Hospitals that once ran without medicine are now seeing supplies arrive. alive. He's not just rebuilding institutions, he's rebuilding belief, and his speeches don't come from teleprompters, they come from somewhere deeper. He speaks of unity, sovereignty, and Pan-Africanism, not as buzzwords, but as blueprints. He channels the fire of Thomas Sankara, the visionary Burkinabe leader, assassinated in 1987 for daring to speak of an Africa free from foreign control. At the AES, Alliance of Sahel States, summit in 2024, Traoré laid it out plainly. Regional unity, homegrown defence and economic self-determination are the only paths forward. No more begging, no more strings, no more playing nice in a rigged game, and people are listening, especially Africa's youth. On social media, a flood of posts praise him not just as a president, but as a symbol of hope. One user wrote, "Captain Ibrahim Traoré is the most loved leader in Africa, especially among the youth. He speaks our language, he fights our fight." That contrast is hard to ignore. Across much of Africa, leaders still operate under the shadow of their former colonizers. They fly to summits in Paris, Brussels, and Washington to ask for debt relief, while their countries sit on top of gold, lithium, oil, and talent. They sign trade deals that benefit corporations and impoverish the people. They protect their power, not their people. Meanwhile, Traoré kicked out the French military. He ditched the colonial currency. He started refining gold at home. That's not just leadership, it's action. And the result? A widening gulf between Burkina Faso and the rest of the region. The AES alliance, Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger, has walked away from ECOWAS and Western interference. Critics call it reckless, supporters call it freedom, and as this alliance grows in popularity, it's forcing a regional reckoning. Who's leading Africa and who's holding it back? It's hard to overstate the scale of what Captain Ibrahim Traoré is trying to pull off. He's not just governing a country, he's trying to rewrite the way Africa does business with itself and the rest of the world. And for now, he's not waiting for permission. In a world where African nations often export raw materials only to buy back the finished goods at 10 times the price, Burkina Faso is trying something different. By keeping gold refining local, the country isn't just creating jobs, it's keeping value in-house. That alone challenges a centuries-old model built to extract African wealth and leave behind dependency. In early 2025, social media lit up with rumours that Traoré had wiped out Burkina Faso's entire foreign debt. It wasn't true. Reuters fact-checked the claim, but the real story was still impressive. Under his leadership, foreign reserves are growing, economic activity is ticking up, and for a nation that has long relied on international aid, that shift alone is enormous. Even so, the challenges Traoré faces are relentless. Security remains fragile. In 2024 alone, terrorist groups were responsible for more than 1,500 deaths across Burkina Faso. Nearly 40% of the land is still affected by extremist activity. The threat is real, and it's not going away anytime soon. That's why Traoré has pivoted away from traditional Western military partnerships. Instead, he's welcomed support from Russia and leaned on allies within the AES, Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger. In 2024, 100 members of Russia's Africa Corps arrived to bolster security. To many in the West, it was a red flag. But to the people of Burkina Faso, it was a sign that someone was finally taking their safety seriously. What Traoré is building isn't just a stronger Burkina Faso, it's a new kind of African alliance. The AES is more than just a military pact. It's a regional bloc based on the idea that African countries can define their own future without needing France, the IMF, or the US to sign off on their decisions. Together, these nations are investing in shared infrastructure, cross-border security, and coordinated economic policy, and the momentum is growing. In January 2025, when Ghana's new president John Mahama was sworn in, the crowd erupted into spontaneous cheers for Traoré. The message was clear, even beyond the AES. Other leaders are beginning to take notice. Rumours have swirled online that Senegal's president Bassirou Diomaye Faye is quietly considering closer cooperation with Traoré's coalition. That's no small shift, because for decades, African unity has been more of a slogan than a strategy. Despite the formation of bodies like the African Union, most African nations still operate independently and often at odds with each other. Trade between African countries remains shockingly low, hovering around just 15% of total commerce. Meanwhile, the continent spends over $500 billion every year importing goods, many of which could be produced right here at home. The African Continental Free Trade Area, AFCFTA, launched in 2021, was supposed to change that, but progress has been slow. The reasons are the same ones that have haunted the continent for decades: political rivalry, foreign interference, and the deep reluctance of many leaders to give up even a sliver of control. Traoré's approach is different. He's not begging for inclusion. He's forcing a realignment, and that realignment is starting to resonate far beyond borders. Across Europe and North America, African communities are rallying around this moment like never before. The April 30th protests weren't just local events. They were global. In cities like New York, Toronto, and Paris, thousands marched in solidarity. They waved flags. They sang in languages from across the continent. They carried signs with one name: Ibrahim Traoré. For the diaspora, the message isn't just about Burkina Faso. It's about reclaiming dignity, rejecting stereotypes, and challenging the idea that Africa must always be helped rather than heard. But not everyone is celebrating. Critics inside and outside Burkina Faso have raised alarm over Traoré's decision to delay national elections. Under a decree signed earlier this year, military rule will be extended until 2029. That's 5 more years without a civilian president. To some, it's a power grab. To others, it's necessary stability during a time of crisis. Traoré insists he's not interested in clinging to power. The enemies of the nation are still active, he said recently. We must show no mercy. His supporters echo that sentiment. For them, elections mean little if the country is under siege. What matters more is continuity, staying the course, completing the reforms, and defending a new vision for Africa. Still, the risks are real. Assassination attempts, foreign meddling, misinformation campaigns, all are growing threats. The recent failed coup, allegedly supported by former Burkina Faso officers and terrorists based in Ivory Coast, is just the latest in a string of efforts to unseat him. To his supporters, this proves one thing: the West is scared, not because Traoré is reckless, but because he's effective, because he's flipping the table. It's not just speeches anymore, it's schools reopening, hospitals restocked, roads being built, kids returning to classrooms in a country battered by war and economic sabotage. These things are not small victories, they're everything. And this is where the AES alliance could become more than a bloc. It could become a blueprint. Imagine a continent where African nations no longer beg for foreign loans with brutal interest rates, where gold, cobalt, and oil are processed at home, where infrastructure is built by local engineers, where security forces are trained, funded, and commanded by Africans, not stationed by foreign armies. The Sahel region has long been seen as unstable, weak, and dependent. But today, under Traoré and the AES, it's starting to look like something else entirely, a spark. If this energy continues, it could inspire more nations to step away from foreign-controlled alliances and toward something truly African. And that shift won't just change trade or diplomacy, it will change how Africans see themselves. Because that's the real battle here. For centuries, Africans have been told they need help. They've been cast as recipients, never as decision makers. But today, the narrative is shifting. People are starting to believe that they can write their own future. And, for better or worse, Ibrahim Traoré has become the face of that belief. The fight isn't over. The road ahead is dangerous, uncertain, and filled with traps. But the April 30th protests showed the world something that can't be unseen. Africa is waking up, and it's not asking permission anymore. Africa is standing on the edge of something massive, something that feels like a breaking point, but also like a beginning. It's a moment of reckoning that's been centuries in the making, and at the heart of it stands Burkina Faso, a small country with a big message: enough is enough. Captain Ibrahim Traoré didn't just spark a political movement, he exposed a deeper wound, one that stretches across borders, languages, and histories. The wound is this: Africa has never lacked resources. It has lacked the will to unite, the leadership to protect its future, and the courage to break free from a system rigged against it. That might finally be changing. From the dry Sahel to the forests of Congo, the calls for unity are getting louder. People are tired of watching their countries beg for crumbs while their gold, diamonds, cobalt, and oil enrich other nations. Tired of summits where African leaders are paraded for photos, then dismissed with conditional promises. Tired of pretending that aid is generosity, not a leash. In 2023 alone, over $88 billion was lost through illicit financial flows from Africa. That's not mismanagement, that's theft. And the numbers don't lie. 33% of people in sub-Saharan Africa still live on less than $2 a day. Meanwhile, 60% of the world's cobalt, 90% of platinum, and vast reserves of lithium sit beneath African soil, untapped, or worse, exploited for someone else's gain. It's not that Africa is poor, it's being pillaged. Social media has become a battlefield of truth. One viral post reads, "Our leaders fly private jets to beg for loans, while our minerals power Teslas." Another says, "Africa doesn't need aid, Africa needs justice." And in the middle of that rising consciousness, Traoré's voice hits like a drumbeat. Africa must stand on its own. It's not just rhetoric. Rwanda is building smart cities. Ethiopia is constructing dams. Kenya is pioneering renewable energy. Nigeria's tech sector is booming. From Nollywood to Nairobi, there's momentum. But that momentum needs protection. Leadership, vision. Too often those who rise up to speak boldly are silenced. Gaddafi was killed. Sankara was assassinated. Lumumba was betrayed. Now, Traoré walks the same tightrope, but he's walking it with eyes wide open and millions of people behind him. His critics say he's dangerous. His supporters say he's necessary. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Many African presidents today are part of the problem. They sign lopsided deals with foreign corporations. They invite foreign troops while ignoring their own security forces. They smile in front of cameras at international conferences, but go home to countries drowning in debt and broken systems. Africa's potential has always been there. The question has always been, who will fight for it? That's what makes the alliance of Sahel states so important. Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger are not waiting for the rest of the continent to catch up. They've kicked out French troops, refused IMF control, and started building something their way. It's risky, it's imperfect, but it's theirs. And that ownership matters. In 2024, Africa's GDP stood at $3.1 trillion. It could triple by 2050. The African Continental Free Trade Area could generate $450 billion in GDP if properly implemented. Renewable energy potential alone could light up the continent and export power to Europe. Meanwhile, Africa's population, over 1.4 billion, with a median age of just 19, offers the youngest and most dynamic workforce on Earth. But none of that matters if Africa keeps trading its future for short-term gain. A united Africa could build its own factories instead of exporting raw minerals. It could refine its own oil, produce its own medicine, and create global tech hubs. Countries like Nigeria and South Africa already have the infrastructure. Countries like Kenya and Ghana have the innovation. What's missing is a shared political will, and that's what Traoré is trying to ignite. Yes, he's extended military rule. Yes, he's aligned with Russia. Yes, some of his decisions raise real questions about democracy. But in a world where democratic leaders are looting national treasuries and selling out future generations, the old definitions are being challenged. For many Africans, Traoré isn't perfect, but he's fighting the right fight. And people are choosing to stand with him, not because they idolize a man, but because they believe in the movement. a movement that dares to say Africa deserves better and must fight to get it. The protests on April 30th were not about one country. They were about reclaiming a future. From Ouagadougou to Accra, Monrovia to Harlem, Africans everywhere sent the same message. We're done playing by rules that were never meant for us to win. And now the world is watching, nervously. Because if Africa rises with unity, purpose and pride, it will change the global order. Let's be clear, this story is far from over. Coups may continue, sanctions may tighten, smear campaigns will likely increase, but the fire has already started. What remains to be seen is who fans the flames and who tries to put them out. Africa is no longer waiting for help. It's standing up, speaking out and choosing leaders who are ready to act, not bow. And whether you support Traoré or question him, one fact is clear. He has started something that can't be undone. Now, it's your turn to speak. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe this is the beginning of a new Africa, or just another moment that will fade? If you support bold leadership, unity, and a future where Africa owns its voice, like this video, share it, and subscribe to this channel to stay updated on what's next. Because this isn't just a story, it's a movement, and it's just getting started.